Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And I remember looking up in the stands that were empty physically, and I just saw angels filling these stands. And they had their hands, and they were lifting their hands up like they were shouting and cheering. And I heard this voice ringing in my heart. And the voice said, "Win or lose today, all of heaven is cheering for you."
His name is Aaron Smith, and he is my guest today on the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. Aaron has been on the pastoral staff of Upper Room Dallas for the past decade. And if you can already hear the birds in the background, he has found himself a wonderful place outside in the Texas sunshine. And I love that you are doing this outside and that the birds get to be part of this conversation. Welcome, Aaron.
Amen. Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. You know, the Texas weather is, we oftentimes say bipolar here in Texas. It'll be freezing cold one day. It'll be super hot the next, super polleny one day, then great air the next. And so today's one of those days where I was like, man, I've got to do this outside.
I love it.
So, and the birds just happened to join. So they're welcome.
They are welcome. And so are you, my friend. You have this book called Big Jesus. And
Yes.
I don't know how many months ago, my friend Angie, she works here at the radio station with me. She was reading it. And she said, Sarah, you would love this. The book, Big Jesus, the byline says, stories of faith that expose the boxes we put him in, him meaning Jesus. I picked it up. I devoured it over the weekend. It's one of those ones you text your friend. You want to read it with somebody else because it's like, are you on this chapter? Did you see what happened?
Wow.
And so, yeah, tell me, how was this book birthed in you?
You know, I was the kid in high school who I remember I turned in my essay one day. You know, my teacher, she sends you back your essay, it's graded. And I remember I was, a junior or senior in high school, and my English teacher said, you know, you're talented in a lot of things, but writing may not be the career for you. And I just had a horrible test. And, you know, looking back now, I'm like, man, what a rough teacher to have. And so I kind of, you know, was like, man, I'll never be a writer. You know, just you have, words can form you, especially when you're young. You know, so fast forward, I'm in my mid-20s. I serve at a church called the Upper Room in Dallas, Texas, and we have a prayer room. And so I lead a prayer set there on Tuesdays. And I was just praying in the prayer set that I was leading. It was unique language, and I had never prayed it before, but I started praying, Lord, you're a really big Jesus. You're bigger than we know. You're bigger than we've seen. Lord, you're big. Be big in America. And we were just praying for the United States. It may have been political stuff going on. I can't remember, but afterwards, I walk off the stage, and a friend who's always around our church and very trusted amongst our staff and community, she walks up to me and she says, man, when you were praying Big Jesus, I just felt in my heart, you're going to write a book and you're going to call it Big Jesus. And when she said that, I felt like Sarah in the Bible, you know, when she gets the word of the Lord that she's going to get pregnant, and she laughs, and I kind of laughed, and I thought, man, I don't have that. That was a cute prayer, but I don't have anything to write around that, you know. So about a year goes by, and I'm just spending time, my regular kind of quiet time morning with the Lord, and have my Bible open, and I'm reading, and I'm praying, and I'm reminded of that word that friend gave me, and I start praying, and it was as if the Lord was saying it to me Himself. You know, you're going to write a book and call it Big Jesus, and I kind of again laughed there, and I said, Lord, I don't have anything to say. I'm not a writer, and I felt right there. The Lord began to give me every chapter. And it just was like you know, you hear people talk about downloads from heaven. I'm like pulling out my phone, and I just start writing down everything. I could write a chapter on this. I could write a chapter on this. I could write a chapter on this. And I'm crying, and I walk into my kitchen, and my wife she's in there. She said, are you okay? And I said, man, I just feel like the Lord is really speaking to me. I feel like I'm supposed to write a book. I feel like I'm supposed to call it Big Jesus. And here's the chapters. And as I'm telling her, she's just lighting up. And she's like, yes, wow, this is the Lord. This is the Lord. And so that following Thursday, don't remember what that day was, but that following Thursday, I set aside Thursdays as my writing time. I would write every Thursday from 8 a.m. to about lunchtime, about noon. And over the next 3 months, I wrote what would become Big Jesus.
3 months.
3 months, yeah. I started on Memorial Day 2021 is when I started writing, and I was finished by August.
That's amazing. I mean, to not even be an author, like, was there ever a time where you sat there and the cursor was just, like, blinking at you, or did it pour out?
Oh, for sure. There were definitely days where I would get writer block and I'm like, what am I doing? But majority of the time, I would say I would sit down, I would start writing, and I would always spend probably the first 30 to 40 minutes of that writing session just in prayer. I knew, Lord, if this is from you, then I want to write with you. I don't want to write for you. I want to write with you. And so I would just spend just time connecting my heart to the Lord. And then after that, there's normally a window about 45 minutes in that I would feel, okay, it's time to start writing. And it would just flow. And then what I found happening was I would get really connected to what I was writing. I would come alive to what I was writing. So then it was just, feeling all my odd times that I would have, just all the spare time windows I would find instead of, going to a show or reading another book or spending it with friends or whatever I may do, I would find it. I would get my laptop out and I would start writing. I just got really connected to writing. And so I remember the day that the box of books came in and I'm opening the box of books and I pull a copy out. I have one here. I pull a copy out and I'm holding it and I'm looking at it. And when I'm looking at it, that's when I remembered that word that I got from my English teacher. I don't know that you'll have a career in writing. And it just was in a moment. It felt like the Lord broke off something that I had believed for so long. And I began to go, no, I think I have a future here in writing. And, this is my first one. I'm currently working on another one, but I've just come alive to writing from that moment. It was so much more than just writing a book. It was really the Lord inviting me into a deeper level of relationship of doing something with him. So that's kind of a little bit of the history, in a nutshell of where the book came from and the story behind it.
Isn't it interesting that in the same way you could have a teacher that I've heard stories before where it's like, I remember being in junior high and my teacher says, you really have a gift for writing. And then that bursts it forth, right?
Right.
Or you can have a word that comes against part of that identity and you can agree with it for a super long time.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know you're agreeing with it. You don't even know that it has affected you so much. And my wife, she says all the time, she has this phrase, she says, words create worlds. And we'll use it a lot with our parenting. We have 3 littles and, just try to be really intentional with the words we use with them, the word choices, the way we respond, because we can look at our own life and we can see it's true. Words create worlds.
Yeah, you just got the most giant head nod from me because I heard that a few years ago, words create worlds. And I I agree with that so strongly. Can you kind of unpack it a little bit more for someone that's like, words create worlds? What does that even mean?
Yeah, well, I would say that simple word where my teacher was, who knows, maybe she was trying to be relatable or maybe she was being cheeky, but she says this word to me. I don't think you have a future in writing. All of a sudden, a world has been created for me that I didn't even realize I was living in. And it was, yeah, I'm not a good writer. Writing's not for me. I'm not good with words. Well, as a public communicator and a public speaker, that's not a very good world to live in. You're just going to have a lot of insecurity. You're going to be looking for a lot of affirmation from people. And so this world was created for, especially like I said, when you're adolescent, when you're a teenager, when you're a toddler, just words are everything to you. I mean, I tell my son, my son is 2, and I tell him almost every night, you're my best boy. You're my best boy. I have 2 daughters and a boy. And so I tell him every night, you're my best boy. Well, I've started noticing he'll tell other people, I'm daddy's best boy. I'm daddy's best boy. And I just can't help but think, what world am I creating for him with the words that I'm speaking over him? And so it's just been very intentional to me to realize words matter. The word phrases you use. I mean, I remember as a kid, my mom would get frustrated at me and she'd call me a brat. You're such a brat. You're such a brat. And I have a great relationship with my mom. But in my adult years, that was actually something I needed to get healing from with the Lord. I just would find myself almost living under this word had created a world for me. And so, yeah, our words matter, which is, why I wanted to write these words, because I believe they matter. I believe the way we talk about Jesus matters. That's why I put the simplest word in my title, which is big Jesus, because I know so many people have so many different things to say about Jesus, this most controversial man that's ever walked the face of the earth. Who is Jesus? And for me, I've chosen to live my life under one word. I want it to create an entire world that he's big. He's bigger than whatever I may be walking through. And he's bigger than any, bill I get in the mail or diagnosis or relational discord or political trauma happening on the earth. He's bigger. I want to remind myself, wow, Jesus, this King of the universe, is bigger. He's big. And it just all of a sudden creates a world for me to where I'm like, wow, I find living in the place of faith so much easier because of the words that I'm choosing to use. It's creating a world.
I think about how Jesus himself is called the Word.
Yes, it's true.
And I think
It's
about
true.
God spoke creation into being with a word. And so if we think about the power of God's word and that Jesus is the living word, what would you say about just being so much more careful about you talked about it in parenting, in conversations with other people. I feel like there's this truth receptor in us that when you call out the gold that you see in someone else, like something inside of them lights up. You might be the first person that names, something that God has planted in them, a seed, and then you water it with your words.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the analogy. We did this at our church one year, and it was we were trying to learn the power of words, but we had this experiment. That's the word I'm looking for. That we would do, and we would have 3 jars of rice. And what you would do is over one jar you would ignore for 2 weeks. You would ignore it. The other jar you would say kind words. You're such beautiful rice. You're perfect rice. You're amazing rice. Oh, God made you rice. And then on the third jar, you would speak harshly to it. You're horrible rice. You taste disgusting. And it was like, hey, let's see what happens with just our words over 2 weeks. And so I remember over 2 weeks, people were bringing their jars of rice, and the words that you spoke kindly to looked the same as when you first put the rice in. The jar that you ignored was just kind of moist and moldy and just kind of crazy. It was crazy what isolation did. But then the words that the jar of rice that you would speak harsh to, there would oftentimes be this black tint over. It was like the way it was decomposing was causing this black just decay. That was it almost went quicker than it should have. And it was the most sobering experiment to do, that if this is how words affect rice, how does words affect the human heart? And I think oftentimes we just don't realize the power of our words.
Yeah. We had a gal here do the same thing with plants, little plants. And she
Okay.
gave them the same amount of water, and she gave them the same amount of sunlight, and they were all in the same spot. There was no variable different other than what she spoke to them. She did the same thing, and the same thing, one wilted, one flourished. She said it was so hard actually to say mean words to the
Right.
plant. She was like, she didn't want to do it,
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen that and I believe it. And tell me, when you were young, was so much of this in you as a toddler? So much of the giftings that you're operating in now, were you similar when you were a little boy?
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting question, and it's actually really profound how our conversation is going based on how I want to answer this question. And the reason being is I was, that kid that anytime the church was open, my family was there. We were at every service, any event the church put on. But when, this, and I write about this in my book, but when I was in 3rd grade, my parents split. And I just had this internal belief: if you love God and you serve his house, you'll end up with a broken family. It was my experience as a 3rd grader. And only the enemy can make a bad situation worse. And that's what he did in my heart. And so I would actually say how I remember my childhood is running as far from God as possibly possible. I wanted nothing to do with God. I wanted nothing to do with this man, Jesus. But I look back and I remember my grandma. This is probably my earliest memory of my grandma, even till today. My grandma had her 80th birthday this month. So she's 80. And even at her 80th birthday party, when I showed up, she called me this. But she would always tell me, Aaron, you're my little priest. You're my little priest. And I hated it as a kid. I was like, Grandma, I'm not a priest, And she would say, you're my little priest. And she would tell me about Aaron in the Bible. Aaron was the first priest. And you're my little priest. You're my little priest. And so I surprised her at her 80th birthday. I walk up. I say, hey, Grandma, happy birthday. And she looks at me and she says, my little priest came. And so I think about the way our conversation is going and the way words create worlds. Well, I didn't see something in me as a kid that my grandma did that today I'm walking in. Today it's true. I'm a modern day priest. I'm a pastor. I've given my life to God's house and to preaching the gospel, to writing books about who he is. And I honestly think all the way back to where would have that originated? Well, probably first in the heart of God, but on the earth, I can remember it originating in words my grandma would speak over me.
Oh,
I'm living out what she called me as a 3-year-old.
I love this so much. What is her name?
Her name's Nelda.
Nelda.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about her.
Nelda Smith.
Tell me about her relationship with the Lord.
Oh man. Well, when you hear about, praying grandmas, she's a praying grandma. I used to stay the night with her once a week. She lived on the same street as us, and I would go stay the night with her from my time I was a little kid until even in high school. I would stay the night with her. Now I have my license, and I'm still going once a week to stay the night with my grandma, waking up and driving to school. But every night we'd get on our knees and pray. And it wasn't like, hey, let's say a nighttime prayer. It was no, when you approach God, you get on your knees at the edge of your bed, you fold your hands, and you pray. And man, I thought I knew something about prayer until I would listen to her pray. And I'll never forget one year when I was a teenager. I was older and I did have my license. I was staying with her. I woke up early to get in the shower, get ready for school, and I could hear crying in the back of the house. And when you hear crying, you're in grandma's house, you're thinking, Grandma, are you okay? And I remember walking down the hallway to kind of check on her. Well, she was on her knees early in the morning, just praying and crying out to God. And that's just who my grandma is through and through. She is a prayer. She is a prayer leader. She's a prayer warrior. She's always praying. Anytime I tell her about anything, she says, I'm going to be praying for that.
Oh,
And she will be.
Yeah. What did she call your sister? If she called you little priest, what did she call your sister?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't remember her calling my sister anything, but she probably was calling her a worshiper. She was probably calling her a singer, musician. My grandma actually taught my sister. If you know my sister, she is a worship leader. She leads oftentimes from the keys. And my grandma was the one who taught her piano. So yeah, so much heritage in my faith is attributed to my grandma. So much of the legacy that we're walking in today comes from her.
Oh, I just love that. I love just the generational legacy that comes from the heart of just a faith-filled man or woman. And then she gets to see the fruit of that with her beautiful life.
Yes.
So I have so many stories in Big Jesus that I love. I'm going to have you do one now, but then I'm also going to ask you to stick around. You're going to be a 2-episode kind of guy.
Amazing.
Let's finish the story about your parents separated when you were in 3rd grade.
Yep.
And then you had to move away from the neighborhood that you loved. You had to move into a small apartment. There weren't any other kids in that area. You don't have the best memories of this new apartment that you moved into, but you were only there for 9 months. Let's talk about what the Lord did.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I was in 3rd grade, I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was a sunny day like today. I'm sure if we were outside, you could hear the birds chirping. And it was a Saturday morning. My parents sat my sister and I down. I was in 3rd grade. My sister was in 5th. I remember my dad's voice got a little shaky, and he said, things are going to start being a little different around here. He said, your mother and I are getting a divorce. And now when you're a 3rd grader, you can't even spell divorce. You can't even pronounce divorce. But my sister, she's just a little older than I. She starts weeping and crying. And I knew by the way she responded, this is not good. This is bad. And like you said, over the next couple weeks, we would move all of our things out and we'd move into this apartment. And when I think back on that 9 months, I remember moving into this apartment with my mom, and I don't remember seeing much of my dad. I have a few memories of my dad here and there. I'm sure he was around because we were in a small town, and my dad is just an amazing man. He's never been an absent father. He's never been a cruel father. He's an amazing, amazing man. So I'm sure as reality goes, he was probably around, but I don't remember much. What I remember is being with mom in this place that's supposed to be home that is not home. And like I said, I was raised in the church. And so as a 3rd grader, only the enemy can help you do this. But I pointed my finger at God and I blamed him. I knew whatever's happening, whatever's not right in our home, it's your fault. And so 9 months later, this is a beautiful part of the story, but it almost as redemptive. Now that I know the Lord, I'm like, wow, it's so like you, Lord, to redeem something the way you did. But I remember it was a Saturday morning. About 9 months later, and I'm walking down the stairs of our apartment, and my dad is there. And it's, my mom's making breakfast, and again, a sunny day. I'm sure the birds were chirping outside, and I remember my dad saying, he knelt down in front of my sister and I, and he said, hey, I got to tell you, things are going to be a little different around here. Your mother and I have bought a house. And over the next couple months, we would move out of the apartment, and we'd move back into a home together. And my parents never formally divorced. They were only separated for a time, and they would begin to work out all of the things that they had going on between them. But as amazing as that is, the damage internally had been done. And now, I mean, I don't know how old you are when you're a third grader. I was probably around 8 years old. And now, when I was 18, 10 years later, I had spent 10 years running from God. I'd spent 10 years, kind of middle finger, if you would, to the Lord. I don't know if you're real, Jesus, but if you are, I want nothing to do with you. And I found a lot of breakthrough in running track and cross country. And there's something about running that if your body's just in pain. Like if you've ever, you ever gone on a run, runners, or there's just something not right with them because
It's
there's
only good when it's done. You're just glad when it's
Right.
done.
Right. You're just in pain while you're running. But the reason I became such a good runner was all of the internal pain I was carrying. I would find relief for it in physical pain when I would run. So I had this really amazing skill of being able to last forever in running because it would numb the emotional pain in my heart. And so I just found myself having scouts come watch me run, getting scholarship opportunities, all of these things. And when I would hear, you can go run on a collegiate level, what I would hear is, this is your ticket out of your small town. This is your ticket out of your way of life. This is your ticket away from your family. I just internally was broken. So this was May of 2012. It's the district track meet of my senior year. I'm getting ready to run my race, knowing there's scouts watching me. If I compete well, like, I'm going to solidify a scholarship today. And I remember getting out of the bus, that yellow public school bus, and I'm getting ready to warm up for my race, have my headphones in. And this was in the day and age where you didn't have iCloud. You had iPod Nanos, and you had to actually plug them up into your laptop, and you had to hit that sync all button to get all your music from iTunes. And my sister and I shared a laptop, and so she had all her worship albums. She was saved. She had already had an encounter with the Lord. And for me, I was the opposite. So I had all my hip hop and R&B, all my profanity music, but I woke up late for the bus that morning, and so I didn't have time to sift through the music, and I just hit that sync all button, so it all gets onto my iPod. And so now I'm at this track meet, and I'm warming up, getting ready to run. I put my headphones in, and a crowd starts cheering in my ears. And it's a crowd because it's the first song of a live recorded album by Jesus Culture. And the album's called Come Away. And the song is after the name of the album. It's Come Away. And there's this crowd cheering in my ears. And it was a cold, windy day in Texas at this track meet. And I remember the only way I know how to describe it is when the Bible talks about open visions. Like, this is what I would begin to experience. And I remember looking up in the stands that were empty physically, and I just saw angels filling these stands. And they had their hands, and they were lifting their hands up like they were shouting and cheering. And I heard this voice ringing in my heart. And the voice said, "Win or lose today, all of heaven is cheering for you." And I remember I start weeping. And this is a public high school track meet. I'm on my knees. I'm crying. My friends are walking up to me, and they're like, bro, are you all right? And I'm blaming it on allergies. I'm like, I'm fine. This is, it's pollen. But I was encountering the Lord. And the only way I know how to describe it is when I was in third grade and my dad said, we're getting a divorce. It was as if the enemy wrote on a sticky note, if you serve God, if you love God and you serve in his house, you'll end up with a broken family. And he took that sticky note and he stuck it on my heart. And I had been walking around for the next 10 years with this sticky note on my heart, this internal belief system, if you would, that if you love God and you serve him, you're just going to end up with a broken family. And that day that I heard the Lord tell me, win or lose today, all of heaven is cheering for you. It was as if he walked up to me and he ripped that sticky note right off my heart. And he just healed me in a moment of a decade's worth of pain. And now here I am, it's interesting. We're doing this call, and I've been on a pastoral staff for 10 years. So I've been walking with the Lord about 15 years, and I can say I'm living in the opposite of that belief system. I have a thriving marriage. I have 3 amazing kids that I deeply love, and faith has oftentimes been hard. It always is. But I can say one thing has been true of the Lord is that he is true to who he says he is. And so, in the book, that story is kind of broken up into 2 parts. You have chapter 5, I believe it is win or lose. And I talk about moving out and my family's separation. I talk about just the power of a broken home, the negative power of what happens in a broken home. But then through that, how I meet the Lord when I'm 18 at this track meet. And then the last chapter in the book is chapter 14, which is titled 1418 Primrose. That's the house that my parents would buy, that we would move into. They no longer live there, and I would talk about how the Lord would actually reconcile and redeem my family, how my family today is just not the family we were when I was in third grade. And my dad's an elder at a church. My mom is an executive director of a nonprofit. My sister's serving in the house of God. We both serve at the same church. We love the Lord. It's profound what God's done with our family.
I love it. I love it. And there's so many more chapters. This is why you're going to be a two-parter. The episodes will be a couple weeks apart. And so if you're listening to this right now and you don't want to wait, I don't blame you. Go grab the book, Big Jesus. Aaron, do you not have an audiobook for this yet, my friend? Because my friends are audiobook people and I'm handing them hard copies.
I do have an audiobook for it. I think I need to follow up with my publisher and get the details on it, because I've been asked this many times. I'm not an audiobook guy, so I don't know where to tell people to go to listen to the audio.
All right, we got to get that thing published.
I did do an audiobook for it. I recorded it myself, actually. One of the hardest things I've done.
Really?
And here's what I can do. I can try to find out, and maybe on the next episode give the details of where you can find that audiobook.
And then while you wait, kick it old school, hold some paper in your hand, and grab a copy of Big Jesus, and we're going to have Aaron talk about more chapters coming up. Thank you. Thanks for listening. We just wanted to take a minute to let you know that just like you and your family, Purposely is also part of a family, the Christa Family of Ministries. Christa helps kids and teens learn and grow in their faith at King Schools and Miracle Ranch Camp. And Christa shares Jesus with people in the poorest, most remote places through World Concern. Christa Senior Living is a community of love and care, and Christa Media is a place of hope on the radio. God is changing lives through these 5 ministries, and Christa is on mission to share the good news of Jesus. To learn more, visit Christa.org.